4 p.m. This meeting is called to order. Please stand for the salutes and a moment of silence. One nation. Please be seated. Roll call, please.
Mr. Dietrich,
Here.
Mrs. Donahue,
Here.
Mr. Elling,
Present.
Mr. Johnston,
Here.
Mr. Knopf,
Here.
Mr. Koch,
Present.
Ms. Lynch,
Here.
Mr. Scholes,
Here.
and Mrs. Smith. 8 members present.
Thank you. The first item up on the agenda tonight is a discussion of the comprehensive plan and the status of it.
Did you pull it up? Okay. So while Megan's pulling up the presentation for you, just want to mention that the comprehensive plan is a process that's required by the Pennsylvania Department of Education. We're required to submit a plan once every 3 years. So with the pandemic, there has been some delays on and extensions on that process, but we are prepared anyway to come forward with the process that we used with a group of stakeholders and with the PDE requirements to show you what that plan entails. And then once the plan is up for review for 30 days, we would like you to approve the plan, and then we would submit it to PDE ahead of our deadline. Coming up. And Megan, if you could just use the microphone so the folks online can hear you.
Okay, so as Jackie said, the comprehensive planning process has been underway for a while.
I
This
don't think
plan,
it's on.
Hello? Got it.
There you go.
We are now in business. Okay, so this comprehensive planning process has been ongoing for a while. This current plan will take us through the year of 2026. Okay, so that is kind of our target planning. Many of our board members, many of our community members, our administrative team were part of the steering committee. So we wanted to formally thank everybody who was a part of this process, because it was a lot of time and energy that folks invested into helping us develop a comprehensive plan that really fits the needs of our district at the current time. So the process was that we held several stakeholder meetings that involved students, parents, teachers, teacher leaders, administrators, community members, and of course, board members. The feedback that we got from the stakeholder group was then taken to create a draft of the profile of a learner. And the board members have a kind of one-page handout that has that draft of a profile of a learner on it. And so that feedback that each of the stakeholders gave us in regard to what do we want our students to leave here being able to do? What important attributes do we want students to have? And that's how we developed the profile of a learner. So like Jackie said, the comprehensive plan is a PDE required plan. However, within the comprehensive plan, there are several sub-plans that have to be done. The first one is the induction plan, and that's basically a plan for how we're going to support new teachers. And the induction plan now has to be a 2-year process, which is great because then that allows us extra time to support new teachers and hopefully improve teacher retention and teacher practices. The other plan that has to be a part of our comprehensive plan is the professional development plan. And current legislation that has passed within the last 6 months at the state level, there are several professional development activities that are required by the state. And I have listed those there for you. Those are all separate professional development activities that we are required to do with our staff. We have to document them and show that we met those state requirements. So some of those are on like a 3-year process that you have to do it within a 3-year window. Some of them are things that we have to do annually, such as the safety training. Those requirements have to be met every year. So the professional development plan is basically a way for us to say how we're going to comply with the state regulations. We also have to do a gifted plan that Dr. Barnhart led the process of that and having a gifted plan. And we also had to ensure that we were meeting all of the Chapter 4 regulations and requirements.
So just so those of you who aren't familiar with the Pennsylvania regulations in Chapter 4, that refers to what courses and programs are offered at every grade level. And it's very specific to elementary, middle school, high school. And you have to check the boxes that you are offering and providing that curricula.
So the
Just out
whole,
of curiosity,
yep.
I'm sorry,
No,
just
go
out of
ahead.
curiosity, because we focus so much on more problem students and the gifted. What percentage of students in the district would you say would fit that?
I think are we at 3%? Is Dr. Barnhart on here? She would know the exact percentage, but
Yeah.
I believe we're at 3%.
We're at a 3%. We've been working towards doing more identification of gifted, and we have, was it 4 years ago, 3 years ago, 4 years ago, we moved away from an enrichment model, the Renzulli model, and moved to more of the Chapter 16 regulations specify. And we actually, instead of having enrichment teachers, we have a K-12 gifted coordinator. And so through that process and the assessments that we've added help us also seek and find students who should be identified for that process.
And Rick, if you remember too, at the curricular co-curricular meeting last week or last month, maybe, we kind of looked at that, turning that MTSS triangle into an MTSS diamond so that we could meet the needs of our advanced learners.
as
And
well
so
as-
the goal is to identify advanced learners, provide them with the extra support. And then if the supports still aren't really meeting their needs, then we go to the identification of being gifted or that process to see if that's how we need to best meet their needs.
And even though it says Chapter 4 assurances there, the gifted assurances and the gifted plan have to meet Chapter 16 regs.
That's a great question.
At what point do we actually start looking for gifted students?
Dr. Barnhart, are you on here virtually? Lisa's back there. I believe it's 2nd grade.
It can be sooner.
Yeah, it can
It
be
can be
sooner, but
sooner.
our typical practice of right now, I believe, are 2nd. Yeah.
So if a parent requests that, it can be sooner.
Right.
But they have to meet certain criteria.
They would have an
To-
evaluation to meet the criteria. Yes, they would be evaluated by a school psychologist using the processes and procedures outlined by PDE.
A parent could request
But if a
an
parent requests it-
evaluation, just like they could if it was
Right.
for,
Or
An
school
IEP.
staff
yeah,
members.
exactly.
same
Same
way.
process, then that
Yeah.
goes to the school psych, the school psych evaluates and gets a recommendation.
I've also, in my career, I've seen students referred as early as kindergarten.
Yeah.
I used to do the gifted screenings in a prior position, and there are some times there's lots of evidence to show that that's the direction you go. So I think that it just depends. It's an individualized situation. So we don't do it until a certain grade. It
Right.
really is specific to
Just
individual
general,
needs.
Yeah. But I do know that with the goal of our current gifted coordinator is to start getting into those early classrooms because there are a lot of early signs that we could be working on.
I think the other thing too with gifted is also to try to look for students who would not typically be considered for gifted or fit the stereotype of gifted. So how do you look for maybe students in poverty or students with diverse backgrounds that could also qualify for gifted programs? Because not all students have good mentors at home to mentor or advocate and make that request. So that's part of what the process is for gifted.
So all of those plans are required by PDE. There's, plans within the plans. And then the second part of the comprehensive plan is to have academic and behavioral goals that are derived from our current data, our current strengths, and our current areas of development. So basically, for those of you who are part of the comprehensive planning process, we really dissected a lot of data. There was a lot of data from both the academic and behavioral lens, and thinking about, okay, what are we doing that is working, that we will continue to do and continue to refine? And what are we doing that might not be working as well? And how do we develop a plan to address those areas of need? So given the current data that we reviewed during the process, we developed 4 academic and behavioral goals. The first goal related to academics is that the implementation and refinement of evidence-based Tier 2 and Tier 3 academic supports in English language arts will lead to a 15% increase in the number of economically disadvantaged students who will meet their projected growth. That's a lot of words, but what our data showed is that our all student groups were meeting their projected growth, but our economically disadvantaged were not meeting their projected growth at the same rate as non-academic or non-economically disadvantaged students were. So we really wanted to specify that subgroup because that was what we noticed in the data. So basically at the end of this time in 2026, when we're evaluating how we did on this plan, we want to see an overall 15% increase in the number of students who met their projected growth. And we measure that through tools that we have that we already give 3 times a year. And so that data is easily accessible and it doesn't add any additional assessment onto the students. It's something that we already do. So we're just looking to increase the number of students who meet that goal. And we'll do that through some really targeted instruction.
We believe it's attainable as well, based on the curriculum development changes that have been going on and some of the results that we've seen over the last couple of years with our huge push on early literacy and the amazing results that we're getting in grades K1, 2 for literacy. Those things should carry through. We know when students do better in early literacy, that they also do better in all academic areas in their later years. So we believe that that's a very attainable goal.
And then-
I just wanted to mention, I'm sorry to.
No, interrupt.
But I know when you gave the curriculum overview, one of the things that did concern me was hearing that we don't have full-time librarians in our buildings. And that would seem to fit in with especially families that don't have the support system. at
While we
home.
don't have full-time librarians, our students do have access to
I-
library
I
books and
understand
library
that, but I mean,
curriculum.
It would make a difference. I would think it would complement this process and help the teachers if the school district really focuses on getting full-time librarian in the high school and in our elementary schools.
But just as a point of clarification, there is librarians and students are receiving library curriculum. It's
I
just they
understand
rotate
that.
around based on the size of
Yeah.
the building because of some of our smaller elementary buildings, there's not a full-time librarian there every day. But you could say the same for STEM, art, music, because it's part of the rotation. So just for clarification that everyone is getting the coursework.
And I do think too, a staffing consideration too, is that we do have a really well-staffed intervention team at both the elementary and middle level, that we have people who are dedicated to facilitating these academic interventions that are timely and targeted. So we can, as soon as we see a deficiency, we can address it with that team. And I think that staffing that we've added over the last few years with the board's support has really paid off. And I think that's something to note as well.
There's 10 positions in K4 alone. There's additional positions, but those 10 positions are also paid for with federal dollars, grant dollars.
So the second academic goal is to develop and implement the multi-tiered systems of support for mathematics that will lead to a 15% increase in the number of students who meet their projected growth. So similar to the ELA, but this one for math is for all students, not just the economically disadvantaged students, because what we do see in our data is that we sometimes have students who need math interventions, but we don't have them in place across the board. So part of this plan is to get them in place across the board so that we can address those needs.
Most of the focus has been on literacy. We have the new math curriculum, the new math materials, and the teachers have been trained on the new math curriculum and materials. So we also believe this is an attainable goal.
And also in that realm too, our goal long-term has been to reduce the number of students who need literacy interventions to make capacity within those interventionists to deliver some math interventions. And very, very proud to say that in 2 of our 5 elementary buildings, we are running math interventions way before we ever thought we would. We didn't think we'd get there this fast, and we are, because we're reducing our ELA numbers so significantly. So it's really good news. And I think this math will, the intervention piece will come because we are addressing the literacy piece so early.
I love coming to the curricular meetings. But I'll be honest with you, all the times I've been there, just help me to understand, when you say it's an intervention, how does, I mean, just what would be like a typical example of what an intervention is?
Often it's usually just, and it's based on data. So if a student is deficient in a particular skill of reading, or they need more number sense when it comes to mathematics, then the intervention is targeted specifically at those skills. So rather than looking at the whole gamut of language arts skills, the whole gamut of math skills, it's targeted to what skills they're specifically lacking. So if a student can't multiply, we need to go back and see, can they add and subtract? Because those are foundational skills. And if they can't, we're not going to continue to try to teach them to multiply. We're going to go back and make sure we can specifically teach them how to add and subtract so that they can eventually get there.
It's almost a personalized learning.
is.
Using the data to target what I need during that win time. And that's
great.
dedicated time across the district to have the interventions take place. But in addition to the win time, a lot of our teachers are doing that within the classroom time as well.
Wow.
Strategic grouping and the interventionist support.
And it's usually a small group of students rather than a
Sure.
larger class, just so you can be more specific and personalized. That's a great question.
Thank you.
The third goal is related to behavior. So the use of the multi-tiered systems of support for behavior and social emotional wellness will contribute to a decrease in the number of behavioral class disruptions by 15%. And this is how we use SWIS to measure our behavioral incidents. So through ongoing conversations, when we look at our SWIS data currently, the number 1 infraction that is
Every
seen as and evidenced in that data is behavioral class disruptions. So that is something that we want to address, because if there's a class disruption, it means learning is disrupted. And we can't meet those academic goals if learning is being disrupted. So these things go hand in hand. The academic and behavioral goals are closely aligned on purpose, because we can't meet those academic goals without addressing those behaviors.
You
So-
know, I think the district should articulate this to the community, that complements or adds to this whole, the concerns around behavioral issues, especially in high school. And I realize these are middle school, and it may take time for, as those children progress, that the curriculum can
These
be
goals
part
are,
of a whole integrative.
this is
wellness
K-12.
process.
That goal is K-12.
Okay.
But I think you're right, Rick, because I think a lot of times, sometimes what we see in behavioral class disruptions is students might be frustrated because it's too hard, right?
Too
The
easy.
content's too hard. So I'm going to, I'm going to deflect and I'm not going to do the work. I might cause a disruption. And sometimes that's to mask a academic deficiency. And so if we can provide those academic supports, get them to where they're able to participate in class and be able to have those skills, can we decrease some of those disruptions that happen because of that?
I think your point is well taken, because I believe it was last spring in 2022, our behavior specialist, Kelly Swartwood, gave a presentation to the board on the behavior data and the things that we're doing to address behavior through a multi-tiered system of support. And so I'm not sure if you were here with us
No, I
during that
wasn't.
time. So I
No.
think there's some folks maybe weren't aware. We've been addressing behavior all along through this PBIS and through this system. And I think we've shared this multiple times. For 95 to 97% of our students, it's working. There's a small percentage of students across our district and across multiple buildings who are really struggling with behaviors. And those behaviors have not only for that small number of students have become so increased in intensity and frequency that, and we're in a mental health crisis. It's not just in our community. It's not just in Pennsylvania. And this was happening before a pandemic, but we do believe that the pandemic has exacerbated pre-existing conditions or behaviors. And so we're not the only school district dealing with these type of issues, but we are proactively, we've had a lot of things in place and we're proactively adding to that. And I'll speak to that a little bit later this evening.
Yeah, absolutely. And
Megan, can I ask
yep,
this?
yeah.
What's Swiss?
Oh, the
SWIS
acronym.
stands for, does
School-wide. Justin,
anybody know what SWIS stands for? It is
information system.
School-wide Information System. It's how we track.
It's
all
just a
behavior
tool. It's an
referrals,
online
yeah.
tool. Teachers make the behavioral referrals in Swiss. And then the consequences are applied and it's all tracked during Swiss. And then we could run multiple reports, type of infraction, location of infraction, if it's bus, hallway, bathroom, classroom, which is how we know that across the district, the most frequent discipline infraction across the district is classroom disruptions. So whether it's seeking attention or somebody who's having a meltdown or something that's disrupting the instruction, that's why we've targeted that as this goal.
Just tell me
But
what
it's-
Swiss was.
It's
Because
a
there's more
good
acronyms
question.
that anybody needs to
Yeah.
know, right?
Thank you for asking us to
Is
do that.
that kind of reporting consistent across the state, you think, or does it vary
S-
from district?
Swiss is a tool. So if a school district has been using positive intervention support, you can use multiple tools to track the data. That's a very popular tool. I was using that in a school district in the mid 2000s. So it's been around a long time and it's pretty reliable. It's norm referenced. Thanks, Christina.
Okay, hold it. It might be norm, but if I'm not mistaken, there's a lot of room for interpretation into those things.
What you define as a class disruption might be.
Yeah, what you
Different
define as a
than-
class disruption might
It's a
actually
wide-
have been a fight.
And what, no, that would be coded differently. In Swiss, it would be coded differently.
Yeah, there's,
Yeah, there's definitions to apply to it.
Hmm.
But what a class disruption looks like in kindergarten versus 8th grade versus 11th grade may be a different type of disruption, but nonetheless, whatever the behavior was disrupted the learning.
which is what matters. Absolutely. So then when we get to the fourth and final goal of the comprehensive plan, our goal is to develop the profile of a learner and create developed or related capstone projects that will be developed, implemented, and refined. And we want 95% of students to show proficiency on those capstone projects by the end of our comprehensive plan in 2026. We're already on a really good path for this because you have the draft of the profile of a learner in front of you. And we already have currently the senior graduation project that has been in place for many years that meets a lot of the components of a capstone project that we're looking to, what we're really looking to do is measure the components of the profile of a learner. How do we know that somebody's an effective communicator? Well, we want to measure that through the capstone project. So we want to work to refine that, but also then build capstone projects for 4th grade and 8th grade as well. So that as they go through their educational journey with us, that we're measuring how they are meeting the goals of the profile of a learner throughout their time and not just at the end.
Do I understand that right? So instead of just having the senior project, they're going to be doing sort of a similar, but a simpler format when they're younger,
Mhm.
age appropriate. And then when they finally get to their senior, it won't be so overwhelming. It'd be sort of
Correct.
like I'm walking into comfortable shoes.
Scaffolding.
Right.
And they're
Scaffolding.
doing that at
Thank
the,
you.
at the exit
That's the right
levels.
word.
Yes.
The four.
Yeah, 4 and 8.
That's exciting. We never had that before, right?
No.
That's
and
what came out
remember-
of this.
Yeah, and we
That's
really
great.
want students to be able to kind of learn to begin to foster the skills and passions that they have. So even currently at the elementary level, we do student showcases where students pick a
Sure,
project
sure,
and
I've seen
we
that.
invite the families in to see what the students have been working on because we want to elicit that sense of pride and I'm working on something that I'm passionate about. And how are you showing us that you're meeting those four profiles through these projects? And that can really, I think, help kind of personalize the learning
When
experience
can
a
we
little bit.
start this?
Well, It's already
Hopefully
in
next year.
progress.
Okay,
It's in
okay.
progress.
We
So
just need to articulate it more. in the
Yes,
community,
yes,
so that the
agreed.
Well-
Community can see some
That's
of
ex-
these
that's exciting.
accomplishments.
well, this
Yeah.
is the
of fourth
first, this
grade.
is the
This is
first,
the first
this
step.
is the
Yep.
first night to
Yeah,
share
I'm
with the
just
board.
saying,
Yep.
those are
Because
the
you're
kinds
going
of
to have to
things that
approve
we're saying.
this. And what we would say is
I
those
vote yes.
fourth and, the fourth and eighth grade projects would be what we would call cornerstone projects.
Sure, sure.
And then the
Mhm.
senior project is the capstone project. And altogether, when you look at the keystones for success, it's on your paper. We know we're measuring academics, and academics are absolutely essential for students, but they're not adequate by themselves. Is we know that employers and what our stakeholders told us is that being a responsible citizen, an effective communicator, a creative problem solver, and a respectful collaborator are also things that we want our graduates to exhibit. So it's very difficult to measure those unless you have a way to do it. And so we thought that a project-based assessment at those four or those three milestones would be the best way to show that we're measuring it.
And because as stakeholders, we believe those things are equally as important, right? We want
Sure.
those for our students, no matter what. And those are the types of things that I think we need to share often, once we have that data, is look at what our students are doing, look what they're capable of, look what they're accomplishing, because we are
And
proud of
If
that.
I could also just make the connection back to our policy committee back in the summertime. Our policy committee also supported our ideas for lesson planning and the lesson planning templates, and how those lesson planning templates would include active student engagement in everyday lessons, so that these pieces would be not just evaluated 3 times throughout a child's journey with our system, but they would be practicing it and then performing at those milestones.
And it's also something that we're being intentional about in curriculum development and design, is how do we create authentic assessments that these things can automatically be embedded in throughout the curriculum process as well. So it's not just that it's being done in 4th, 8th, and 12th grade, but that it's truly embedded across the board.
I
So
think I'm going to have a heart attack. I have been waiting years to get away from the scholastic academic, 1 + 1 = what, Roger?
Roger
Okay,
likes
anyway.
3.
This is really exciting. I know it's been talked about for a while, but this really is exciting.
Well, it's coming together because
It
it's
is.
really this comprehensive. We started with our future focus comp plan in 2019. We refined it because we felt that even though our statements, and we shared this with you when we were in the comp plan process, even though we know we like those traits in our graduates, how do you measure it? So now it's more formalized in this format to move forward.
Mhm. No,
I think
thank you.
it shows our commitment to our students. We love data, right? We love all sorts of data, but they're more than that too. And it's really important to foster.
Our students are
these
way more
skills.
than a test score.
Absolutely. So on the screen and in front of you, you have the draft of the profile of a learner. We just looked to take that stakeholder feedback that we got through the comprehensive planning meetings and kind of give some qualifiers and give some additional wording to what those things mean. Like, what does it mean to be an effective communicator? And give that some additional information.
The boxes with the small print, and I think you'll have some time to see it in some larger print that's readable for you. But those are the words that came off of the sheets and the activities that we did in small groups and then jigsawed back. That all came from the stakeholders. And then the administrative team organized it into those four groupings and defined what that meant based on what the intent was from the stakeholder group.
So if you remember all those little dots we placed on words to try to gain consensus, those are all reflected here. And we did double and triple check in many cases that everything that was on those sheets was reflected in this, because that was really important to us to make sure that it really articulates what the community wanted. So our next steps, we're going to work as a team to share this with the staff. As Jackie mentioned, this is step 1. Sharing with you, having you approve the comprehensive plan, and then we will work to share that out with our staff and articulate what our next steps are for that will take us through 2026. We're going to actively put teams together to develop those cornerstone projects and get those off and implemented as quickly as we can. But we still want to make sure that they're quality projects. And additionally, when we are working this summer to develop our school improvement plans that are required, we will be using the information from this comprehensive plan to build our school-specific improvement plans. So this really will drive our work for the next 3 years.
It's a systemic approach.
Yep. Any questions?
Thank you.
Thank you, Megan.
Thanks, Megan, for presenting. And I just want to thank the entire admin team who has been part of pulling this together. And we met frequently over the last couple of months to refine that work. But thank you for presenting, but thanks for everyone for helping out.
Okay. The next item up is the Baker Tilly finance audits.
Yes, please. Joni's not with us this evening, but we felt confident having you come in.
Sure, we're happy to be here.
Thank you for coming.
Well, good evening, everyone.
You have to,
Test.
Yep.
That good?
It's good.
Appreciate the opportunity to be here with you folks tonight to share with you the results of our June 30, 2022 single audit of Keystone Central School District. We're a little bit behind schedule this year. Typically, this meeting would have taken place in the December, January timeframe. You are a June 30 fiscal year end. Typically, it takes maybe 2 to 3 months for the business office to close your books. We typically start the audit work maybe in the September timeframe. A heavy couple of months for us is September, October. Then normally we're kind of finishing things up in November, December. And we almost always have the report issued before the holiday break. This year, I think it was September of 2022 that your business manager resigned. I think it was October of 2022 that the fiscal, her replacement essentially resigned. And I can't remember when Joni started again. It was maybe late 2022.
November, yeah. We had an interim business manager
That's
in
right.
there too.
Jeff was on board for a
Yeah.
while. So
Quite
it was
a lot of transition.
a little chaotic. So, we're here in April kind of sharing this information that we normally would have covered in December. That being the case, things went reasonably well. Everyone from those that were departing, from those that were incoming, put forth a really good effort. There's a lot of information that your business office needs to provide as it relates to this process. All sorts of schedules and bank reconciliations and debt confirmations, and the list goes on and on and on. So again, those folks that were on their way out, I think put forth a good effort to provide us what we needed. And the incoming folks did their best to kind of work to keep things moving. I think you'll see that aside, I think you'll see as we go through the numbers tonight that it was a pretty good year financially. Your district fund balance increased somewhere in the neighborhood of $900-some thousand. It was just under $1 million. Keystone, like a lot of schools that we deal with within this region here, it seems funny to say this, but the past few years, kind of throughout the pandemic, have been pretty good years financially. There's been a lot of federal stimulus money that's been pushed out to schools and intermediate unit. In fact, I wouldn't limit it to educational entities. If you're a hospital or a college or a for-profit entity, there's been some form of federal financial assistance out there, and school districts certainly got their fair share. So it was a good fiscal year. We do have a finding in this year's audit. We'll cover that. It relates to the accounting for the capital assets. Your buildings, your vehicles, your computer equipment and so forth, all of that is tracked. As you buy those assets, they're capitalized and depreciated over their estimated useful lives. There's been an appraisal company that's been involved with that for a long time. And in 2022, there was kind of I'll call it a retagging or a reappraisal process that took place. And as that was done, the audit trail, and I think it was a combination of the audit trail wasn't kind of as succinct as we needed it to be. And then just kind of the people coming and going, there was some confusion there. So we had some pretty significant adjustments. What does that mean? You know, we're not talking cash or revenue or expenditures. It's kind of a balance sheet item that needed adjusted for audit purposes. So there was a finding. It's not, I think historically, it's been relatively rare for Keystone to have any findings in the audit. I think this is a one-time thing. We kind of sorted it out with Jeff and Joni and so forth. And we've got the numbers kind of reset for June 30, 2022. So going forward, hopefully that won't be an issue anymore. But I guess with that, we'll kind of jump into our formal presentation. We can do this as quickly or in as much depth as you like. We'll try to keep it to maybe 20 minutes or so if that works for you folks. But if, you know, just give us the old move it along sign if we need to go more quickly here. So turn it over to Adam.
So good evening, everybody. My name's Adam Hartzell. I'm a senior manager stepping in this year to kind of help bridge the gap on our side. With me is John Compton, who just spoke, and also Becky Swales is here as well. The rest of the team that we had involved is on the screen. These are the people that were actively working on it. And then we had some other folks that were kind of helping us behind the scenes that wouldn't have been directly interfacing with your staff here, kind of working actively on the audit. So from an agenda standpoint, we'll give you a very brief executive summary. There are some required communications that we're supposed to have with what's termed those charged with governance or the board. So we'll cover those briefly. We'll talk through the financial highlights. And then once we're done here, we'll make sure that you get a copy of this presentation. There is definitely, the appendix has some additional detail on the required communications. We'd certainly encourage you to take a look at that. I won't work through all of that. To do that, I'd be here for probably the next 2 hours, which none of us want. So with that, from an executive summary standpoint, we did communicate with you back in the fall in terms of how we plan to go about performing the audit. And as we worked through the audit, we performed it as we had previously communicated. Your financial statements are fairly presented in accordance with accounting principles generally accepted in the United States. What does that mean? That means that there's this system of accounting principles that kind of sits behind the scenes that dictates how you go about keeping your books on a day-to-day basis, and also what needs to be included in the actual financial statements themselves. Can be a very technical information that's there. I think your financial statements are roughly 70 pages in length. So they're not a short read. That at the end of the day, our responsibility in this process is to provide an opinion on their fair presentation. And in doing that, as we'll look at here in a slide or two, your financial statements are fairly presented. So that's a good thing. I mentioned all of the disclosures that are in your financial statements. Everything that needs to be in there is in there. And as John mentioned, your general fund balance increased $955,000 for the year ended June 30, 2022. So you added to your fund balance through the year. Always a good thing to say to an entity. I mentioned the opinions that we give. We actually give two different opinions in your financial statements. So the type of audit that we perform is what's called a single audit. Essentially means there's two different audits that roll together into one document. The audit is both financial in nature, and that we give an opinion on the fair presentation of the numbers. And because the district receives and expends more than $750,000 in money that starts at the federal government and comes to you either directly, or most of it comes indirectly through the Commonwealth or other entities like the intermediate units, because you expend more than $750,000, you require what's known as a single audit. It's this financial statement, and we also have to test compliance with certain what we call major federal award programs. So as we talk about the opinion on your financial statements, we're providing what's known as an unmodified opinion, which means without exception, the financial statements are fairly presented in all material respects. That's the highest level of assurance that any auditor can give. No auditor can say your financial statements are 100% perfect. For us to do that, we'd have to have somebody here every day the doors are open, where transaction gets processed and we look at it in real time. That would be extremely cost prohibitive and extremely labor intensive. And so that's where we get to this material aspect of the financial statements.
There may be a day when Baker Tilly's computers are auditing Keystone Central's computers and 100% of those transactions are being audited. They say that's 8 years down the line. So I guess stay tuned for that. But for the time being, it's done on we set materiality thresholds and so forth.
The second opinion we give, I mentioned these major federal award programs. There were actually 3 different federal programs that were required to be audited from a compliance standpoint. Your child nutrition cluster, basically your food service program, your special ed cluster, again, special ed program, and these education stabilization funds, which is kind of some of the new funding that came out under the COVID and ARPA money. As part of that, we're providing an unmodified opinion on your compliance. It means without exception, you've complied in all material respects with all of the strings and the red tape and the grant agreements that you needed to follow to use that money. And from the compliance side of things, there were no findings that we had on the compliance. So you did what you needed to do with the money, you used it appropriately, you reported on it. Everything was good there from our audit standpoint. As John mentioned, there was a finding on capital assets. Very briefly, I know there's a lot of slides on this, or a lot of slides, a lot of words on this slide. I forgot my PowerPoint etiquette. Essentially, internal control over financial reporting represents that system of checks and balances internal to the district to make sure that transactions are occurring and being processed the way they should be. It's basically review and approval of all of the transactions. As part of this, we are required to understand your system of internal control to plan the nature, timing, and extent of our audit procedures. If, as we're gaining that understanding, we see issues in that internal control system, we need to bring it to your attention. We do that in the form of a finding over internal control over financial reporting. The finding we have is identified and classified as what I'll call as a material weakness. That means that the deficiency is such that there could be a material, think big number, misstatement in your financial statements that internally would not have been prevented, detected, and or corrected. So that's where, as we came in, we found a capital.
I'm sorry, what? Could you please,
Yeah.
those last 2 sentences?
Yes, there's a lot there. So it means that a potential material misstatement could have occurred internally that would not have been identified by your existing internal controls.
Such as?
Such as that the adjustments for capital assets. So there were assets that were not initially capitalized that should have been, that were not initially identified internally.
Or another way to say that, had it not been for the audit, those incorrect numbers probably wouldn't have been identified.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Is it accurate to say that the report, I think there was an incomplete report that was submitted and it was our business manager who caught the mistake?
That's what I was gonna ask. Who just
Right.
got the mistake that caused the finding?
So there were actually a couple of pieces that rolled together in this. One piece was the asset valuation that occurred and that retagging, where there were. So one of the things we need to do and disclose in the financial statements is here's where your capital assets were. Here's the numbers as of the beginning of the year. Here's where they are at the end of the year, and show what did you buy, what did you get rid of. As we're working through that information from that valuation, there was a lot of information and a lot of assets that were there at June 30, 2021 that we could not correlate and find on the June 30, 2022 valuation. So that was the one piece. And part of that was the retag, and that when they retagged I'll say the movable equipment, all of what was in there at June 30, 2021 as movable equipment was not tagged with a new number and dropped off the report. But you still had it. It was still in service. It's still here, should have still been an asset, but it disappeared from the report. So that was the one piece there. The second piece was during the year ended June 30, 2022, there was about $6.3 million that was expended out of your capital projects funds that was not initially provided to as part of the
That was the
valuation process.
incomplete Report.
So yeah, that's where it, just that kind of capital asset accounting was not really clean for the year ended June 30, 2022. So as part of that, we really recommend that the district kind of reevaluate your process for managing and maintaining the capital assets so that it's not a recurring issue and that you kind of get it under control here and it's a one-year deal that drops off because you've got it corrected going forward. Okay, makes sense?
I think that just to follow up while you're there and you're headed there is the recommendation is to stop using that other agency.
I mean, I think it's to evaluate, does it make sense to continue?
Okay, thank you for clarifying.
Keystone has worked with this appraisal company for decades. And there was a time pre-2004 where governments didn't report their capital assets. It was kind of a big deal in 2004 when governments picked up these assets and started reporting them. This company assisted Keystone that year as they did a whole bunch of other governments. It seems to work fine for 10 years and then there's a blip and it works great for another 10 years and there's another blip. So, I think in terms of our recommending no longer working with that agency, that's not what we're saying. We're just saying, it's in those years where you do have a retag or do something out of the ordinary, you need to be like hyper focused on it because there's so much detail there. If it gets out of control, it's a tough thing to manage.
When you say retagging, you mean an item that was once a number 1,
Yes, ma'am.
someone went in and made it a number 2,
Right.
Could be
basically.
a laptop.
Yep.
Could be a Chromebook.
Okay, well, that just seems like a software, right?
Yeah,
An
so
input and software thing.
yeah, so our understanding is part of that, and I mean, we had direct conversations with the appraisal company that as they did that, when they took asset 1 and retagged it to asset 1000, that there was no trail there to say, okay, asset 1000 used to be asset 1. Asset 2 is not on the report. Where did it go? It's just,
Okay, so
The
it
old-
wasn't user friendly.
yeah, the detail, the underlying detail just wasn't there in a lot of cases.
Sure, I
It
get
may
it.
have been there, but just with people coming and going, it might have got lost in the
Sure.
shuffle.
Understood, thank you.
And I will also clarify, I mean, I think this valuation company you've used them for more than just the financial reporting aspects of capital assets. I think you've also used them to help with what's our insurable values so there's more to it than just this, what's the numbers that go into the financial statements piece of it.
Thank you.
Required communications, there are new accounting standards that come into play from time to time for your year ended June 30, 2022. This GASB, this Governmental Accounting Standards Board Statement 87 dealing with leases came into play. Essentially, it established a single model for leases that using the premise that all leases, with certain exceptions, all leases are essentially the financing of the right to use the underlying asset. And essentially should be accounted for the same as if you had bought the asset outright and issued some kind of debt to finance the purchase. Essentially, where in years past, a lot of that stuff has been, hey, we enter into a lease, we expense the lease payments as we make them. There's no liability that goes on the financial statements and no asset that you're controlling the use of. So that's kind of what this standard is intending to do, is kind of say, okay, the substance of what you're doing really is you have an asset that you have control of the use of, and you have a long-term obligation that you should be reporting. It's on your, I'll say, the top level financial statement, so it doesn't impact your day-to-day accounting. It doesn't impact the general fund. That continues to be the way it's always been. It's more of this long-term perspective is where it impacts. The impact was and we had to go back to the beginning of the year that you were presenting. So July 1, 2021 was where we started and said, what existed at that point in time? And there was about $533,000 in right to use assets and lease liabilities that came on at that point in time, which was that beginning of your current fiscal year.
Okay.
And it also expanded the note disclosures that need to go with it, because now you've got this $500,000 liability that a reader needs to understand what is that. Most of the rest of what's in here is, there's really not a lot to report on. There's no significant or unusual transactions that we noted. There are no other auditors involved. Most of the numbers in your financial statements are hard and fast numbers. I mean, we can nail them down and say your cash in the bank this is what it is. There are some numbers, though, that are a little bit squishier. And those are where there's estimates involved, capital assets being one of them. You buy a desk. How long's the desk going to last? Well, maybe it's you say, hey, we think we're going to use it for 5 years. 10 years later, you're still using the item. So your estimate was off a little bit. Or you could say, hey, we think we're going to use this for 5 years, and 3 years later, it's outdated and you need to replace it. So that's kind of the estimation there, and they call that depreciation expense. There's also significant pension and OPEB liabilities. So it's things that you owe to retired teachers and faculty. That's estimated based on a lot of different factors that actuaries are actually involved with that to determine what goes in there. There were no significant changes from year to year. They're very consistent. We had no disagreements with management. As John mentioned at the onset, we are a little bit delayed. Just the process of working through and getting all of the information was a little bit more complicated, just with the turnover and figuring out, okay, who has it and who can go back in time and find where it was.
We were glad to see Joni return. There's a lot of turnover. I'm sure I'm preaching to the choir here, but there's a lot of turnover.
Could you use the microphone?
Yeah, just saying we were glad to see your former assistant business manager return, because school business, like everywhere these days, it's tough to find good people. So.
Okay, the last piece on the required communication before we look at the numbers deals with this independence considerations. And so we need to be independent of the district, meaning we can't step into the shoes of management. There's a lot of things we can't do. Our primary objective is to provide our opinion on your financial statements. Anything that we may be involved with that's over and above that is what we call a non-attest service. And we just need to make you aware that there were some non-attest services that we performed. Things such as helping to put together the financial statements, converting them from the fund level, which is what your accounting system keeps them on, to the top level, the full accrual, long-term perspective, implementation. We talked about lease accounting, helping to implement that new standard. Those are all things that are non-attest in nature. There are safeguards in place, namely people inside the district that can accept responsibility for what we do, that we are able to maintain our independence. So if we were not able to maintain our independence, we could not issue the audit report.
Sure.
That's at the end of the day, that's really what the bottom line comes down to. So
So we're about 15 minutes into it. Did you want to kind of provide a Reader's Digest version of the? Are we to that point? I just don't want to run over time.
Well, I'll be quick because I talk fast. I guess we'll start with general fund budget versus actual. Actual revenues were about 53,000 more than the final budget. Actual expenditures, however, were about $700,000 more than the final budget. The net result of that was that the district, though, had a positive budget variance of nearly $1 million. In the end, it was still good, and the overall integrity of the process was being maintained throughout the year. The next slide is just a graph of budget versus actual. I'll kind of, that you can look at it when we give you the copy of the presentation. The next slide, however, general fund balance. The composition of your fund balance is made up of non-spendable, committed, assigned, and unassigned fund balance. And those areas where the largest portion is your committed fund balance, that is made up of, it's fund balance constrained for a specific person, or sorry, person, for purpose internally imposed by the, most likely the board. And that's made up of capital projects, items, fund balance that is committed for capital projects, for PSER rate increases, personnel, technology, health insurance, reserves. The next largest piece is your unassigned fund balance, which is basically the fund balance that's not either constrained as assigned or non-spendable or as a committed fund balance. The next slide talks about your fund balance, kind of the health of your fund balance. So the Government Finance Officers Association recommends a 2-month worth of operating expenditures within your general fund. And this slide, what it will show you is your actual unassigned fund balance is a little over 6 million. The benchmark for that for the 2 months is about 13 million. But when you add your unassigned to your assigned and committed fund balance, you're well over that 2-month recommendation.
So what's our 2-month recommendation supposed to be? So
It's about 13 million.
13, but we're at
The
6.
unassigned portion, so the portion that basically you can use, that's not committed to something specific, yes. But in total, you've got over $16 million in fund balance when you take your assigned, your committed, and your non-spendable.
Does that change our credit rating or anything like, or just a recommendation?
It's just a
right? Sure,
recommendation.
okay, thank
Remember when the state doesn't pass the budget and we have to get our revenue?
you.
We have to continue to
Right.
operate.
The next slide kind of is a breakdown of the last 5 years and your fund balance compared to that 2-month recommendation. So you can see it's actually improving. The next few slides are just 5-year comparisons of your general fund revenue by source, your local, state, and federal, as well as your expenditures by instruction, non-instructional support services, debt service, and transfer. So it's just a historical comparison of revenues and expenditures.
Could you go back one slide, Adam?
To revenue?
You can see 2020, 2021, 2022, the federal revenues kind of ramping up there. It was pretty consistent, 2018, 2019, 2020. Then the ESSER funding, the other federal stimulus grants hit, and I think for June 30, 2022, there was over $11 million of federal financial assistance. So that's probably going to go in the other direction here these next few years, but it's a pretty marked increase there.
Yep.
We kind of already spoke about capital assets, but some of the major additions were the middle school track, the Central Mountain High School parking lot. Bucktail had some major renovations. So those make up the $6.5 million worth of capital additions for fiscal year 22. Long-term debt, the district's debt at fiscal year ending 22 comprised of the 2018 general obligation note series A and B and the 2020 general obligation bond series A and AA. Long-term debt at 6/30/2022 was approximately 27 million. And then there is now the lease obligations, which Adam spoke about, which was about 476,000 at the end of the school year.
Okay, so the last couple of slides here, really, we get into some of the PSER's net pension liability and the OPEB liability. Here, this slide, we're showing what the district's contributions were graphically over the last 5 years. And down at the bottom, you see fiscal year 18, your contribution rate is kind of underneath that. So your required contribution for 2018 was 31.74% of payroll. If we fast forward to 2022, that was up to 34.14%. The other piece to keep in mind is the state does reimburse you about 50% of that, whatever you're contributing as well. So it's still a big number in your budget.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
If going into 4 years, the rate increased about 4%, how come the total amount is lower?
Yeah, so the rate went up. It's also a function of your employee salaries. And so in there was a salary dip back in 2020, and now it's kind of ramping back up the last couple of years.
Both the salary dip and a reduction of staff.
Yes, correct. Yep, that's all based on the staffing complement and what's going on there. So as we kind of look at this in a little bit different format, and this is really just more for kind of informational purposes. I don't have a crystal ball, so I don't know what you're thinking 2, 3, 4 years out in terms of what's going to happen with your wages. But assuming that, let's say you have a 5% wage increase each of the next 4 years, and looking at what's your required contribution, it does drop down for a couple of years and then it comes back up. So you're in that high 33, low 34, mid 34% range. Your contribution is only going to increase. Using this, like I said, I threw in a 5% growth factor for wages just to throw something in there. If we look out and you do hit that each of the next 4 years, 2026, your contribution is going to be over $13 million towards PSERS pension. Again, I don't have a crystal ball, so don't hold me to that number, but just wanted to give you some kind of a little bit of, okay, what's on the horizon. It is a big deal. It is important to kind of keep that in mind as you're doing your budget on an annual basis.
Okay, but then the state, that's before the state reimbursed us 50%, right?
That is correct.
Okay.
Yes.
Very important.
Yeah, this is just gross what you're paying, not the 50% that you're ultimately paying.
12.5. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I'll go ahead. Sorry.
Yep. So as we look at what that long-term pension liability is at June 30, 2022, it's about $90 million for Keystone Central School District. That has decreased from 2021. A big component of that is this plan gets measured on a 1-year lag. So your June 30, 2022 numbers are based off of June 30, 2021. What do we know happened in 2021? Well, the markets were going crazy. Not going as crazy right now, but at that point they were going crazy. So there is an element there of what's the investment market doing? What are the funds that are in the plan growing at? That really helped to reduce your liability for 2022. Again, I don't have the crystal ball to look into the future, but I would expect that knowing what the market has kind of been doing, that it's probably not going to be any less than that $90 million for 2023. Most likely it's going to go up just based on the market conditions. From the OPEB, so pension is what do they get from a pension benefit? OPEB is retirees that are part of PSERS get some cost assistance with premium share for their medical insurance. The liability for that for the district was about $5.2 million as of June 30, 2022. In addition to the PSERS, you also have your own local plan. The liability on that local plan was about $19 million at the end of June 30, 2022. So it's that, again, medical benefits, people staying on your plan after retirement, they get a subsidy. There's a lot of pieces that go into that number.
Just as we talk about pensions and other post-employment benefit liabilities and so forth, these are super long-term legacy liabilities. We're not going to have to pay this out of next year's general fund budget. This is going to be paid out over decades. But it's still, there's sizable numbers on your balance sheet, and every school's in the same situation. It's PSERS at one point in time was fully funded. And at this point in time, I think the latest I saw, it's maybe 60% funded. So anyway.
Okay. The last piece here that I wanted to mention, we talked a little bit about the compliance aspect of the audit. For the year ended June 30, 2022, your federal expenditures amounted to about $11.2 million. And most of the rest of what's on here, we talked about in terms of what programs we audited, no findings from prior years. But I did want to point out that for the year ended June 30, 22, it's about $11.2 million in money that started at the federal government, and made its way to you as federal financial assistance. Comprised of more than just the 3 programs that we were required to audit, but those were the 3 that kind of came up based on our risk-based approach that is what our professional standards tell us we need to do. Okay. With that, I know we've thrown a lot of information at you. You've been great. Really appreciate the interaction. Any questions on anything we said or didn't say?
I'm really worried about that I mean, this is outside of which, but that's the worst number I've heard yet about PSER. It's only 60% funded at this point. And they're just hoping that somebody makes up the difference. I mean, they're not expecting the locals, are they?
You know, if you were to look at these required contributions, in fact, in your financial statements, there's a schedule that shows what what the employer contributions have been over the past 10 years. Those rates, when you think of it, for every dollar you pay an employee, 34 cents roughly goes into the pension plan. If we were to backtrack that number 10 years ago or 15 years ago, it was a fraction of that. So as PSERS became significantly underfunded, and 60% is better than it was somewhere around 50%.
I didn't know that.
The means of getting that plan back to a reasonably funded level has been to jack up the required contributions locally. So it's been an obscene burden for schools. But yeah, that's about where it stood as of its last PSERS issues, what they refer to as an annual comprehensive financial report. You can find it online at PSERS.gov.
Don't worry,
Yeah,
thank you.
sure.
Just for my own general knowledge, do you have any idea what Social Security is funded at?
Probably something similar. It's
I thought it was lower.
yeah.
So it's quite a bit lower than 60%.
Yeah.
That's what I was wondering.
They're similar arrangements. They're both kind of paying today in hopes that on down the line, there's going to be continued inflows.
Do you have any recommendations? I mean, the administration is, tasked with certain things, but is there anything that you want to give recommendations to the board members, given our responsibility in regards to all the work you've done or to the future or?
Yeah, there's as it relates to PSERS or just in
And
general?
whatever you think would be helpful for the board.
We will provide you with this PowerPoint here. I'm not sure if we include board resources. Within this handout that you'll get, there's a section we refer to as board resources, which includes links to Baker Tilly's website, which has all sorts of information, articles, white papers, studies that have been done in terms of efficiency and so forth, that I guess we provide access to that. We're happy to kind of delve into it more if anything is of particular interest to you.
Well, that's what I'm saying, about whether it's something that's more appropriate for the board members to learn or to know about versus, the administration.
Yes,
They've got
ma'am.
their, you know what I'm
Yep.
saying? There is a.
Yep. We will share that with Joni and make sure that the board resources that we have available to school districts and so forth, you have access to.
That'd be super terrific. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Well, thank you, everyone. Appreciate your time. Nice to see everyone again. These last few meetings, I think we've done via Zoom, so it's nice to see everyone in person. When Joni is back, we'll finalize this. We'll get it filed with the federal government, the state government, electronic municipal market access, and be done with it for 2022.
Thank you very
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
All right, next item up on the agenda for tonight is the hearing of visitors. I think we have one or two who have signed up. Christina Onasconich. I know, I had help. Yeah.
Is it on? Okay.
Yep.
So I attended a couple of meetings recently and just felt that we needed a little positive spin on things that are happening in the district. So I just wanted to share with you something that we're doing at the middle school that seems to be really helping our staff morale and our student morale every single Friday. So for 2 Fridays, we have implemented High Five Fridays. And we started off the first Friday a couple weeks ago with just students being at every entrance to the building. And I had my leadership students that came early. They showed up at about 7:40. And then we talked about what High Five Friday is all about and where we need to be standing and how they go about doing the High Five Friday, which is standing at the entrances, offering high fives to students as they enter the building, waving if they're not comfortable with getting a high five, and just offering friendly greetings. And the students did a very nice job. They had a lot of fun, and that group has now doubled in size. Last Friday, we had 2 weeks ago, tomorrow, we had our other High Five Friday. And that one, we had, like I said, double the amount of students, but we added foam paw print hands for the adults in the building. So there are these big foam hands that we put over top of our hands, and they're shaped like a paw print and they're blue. And they're bigger than my face. So you see these teachers, all ages, acting like they were kids again, just high-fiving students. And the students were so excited and they were pumped up, and the energy that just flew through the building was incredible. I mean, the teachers were talking about it. The students were talking about it. Our principals got on board, and they also used their foam hands to greet students and high five them throughout the day. And I think the more opportunities we give our students and our staff to interact in a positive way and just have fun, it literally is contagious. And so tomorrow, I cannot wait to show up to school early and welcome those students. And, our group is just, it keeps growing. I have more students coming up to me, Mrs. O, how can I get involved in High Five Friday? Can I be part of the club? I'm like, well, you already have a club, but sure, you can be part of the High Five Friday club, and you can show up here, whatever time you get here, just pick an entrance and jump in line and make that tunnel and just spread that positivity and that happiness and the kindness and just keep it going. And the greatest thing was the first week we did it, where my classroom is, I get to pass a lot of 5th and 6th graders as they're going to their itinerant classes. And even throughout the day, the students were stopping each other in the hallway saying, High Five Friday, have a great day. High Five Friday, have a great day. And it brought happy tears to my eyes the entire day. And it's one of the best things that I think we have going right now. And I just want our district to know that we have so many amazing kids. We're not perfect.
That's why we're here.
The district isn't perfect. Our buildings aren't perfect, but we have such amazing kids. And they want more than anything to have fun. And our staff too. Like, we have resilient staff who come in every day fighting those obstacles and challenges, and they still get the job done, and they still can put a smile on their face at the end of the day and know that they're there for the right reasons. So thank you for everything that you're doing to make our district better. And thank you for supporting even the small things that really do make such a big impact.
That was beautiful.
Thank
very
you.
much.
Thank you. A question, do the building, or does the district have like a monthly award for any teacher or staff person that's
Well,
even nominated by peer?
actually,
That would be fun to
It
do
would be
even
really-
here,
Yeah, and we can,
once a month with
you know,
anybody in the district can nominate a
Well-
staff or peer for anything.
at the middle school, we have staffley recognition, which my leadership club started in January, and any person in the building, students, adults, can nominate an adult in the building, and it can be teachers, principals, secretaries, bus drivers, cafeteria workers, custodians, and we've hit all groups within our building. And we did a complete sweep in January for semester 1, and I think we had 142 nominations. And we've done that monthly now. And the leadership students work on creating certificates for the adults that are nominated. And they put all of the comments on those papers that teachers get to see and the adults get to see and principals and, everybody that's nominated gets to see all the wonderful things that are being said by colleagues and by students in the building. And that has also been something that's just spread some positivity throughout the school. So we do have that going, but it would be really cool if maybe the board decided to do something like that as well.
He's in charge of our
I think
social
the-
programming.
We should talk.
The leadership class,
He's
I
your man.
think that's one of the benefits of the leadership class, but there's been so many that have happened over the last couple of years. So thank you for taking that on and the work that you do with Justin's in coordination with that.
I love it. So you're welcome.
I think the next thing is we make this principals do something like we duct tape them to a wall.
I think that's a great idea. As I'm looking around, seeing all the principals here, I totally support that.
Love that, I think.
They would love it.
Smile, Nick.
I just want to thank you for taking the time to make us aware of that, because we've had so much on the other side of it, the negative kind of things that we hear all the time. And to bring that to our attention, I mean, I just thank you a lot, because I think that's something that we needed to hear right now. And it sounds like you're doing a great job with those kids, and everybody in the building sounds like they're really on board with that. And I've done things in the past, like you're talking about, Rick. I've had pies in the face and different things. And that is important. I mean, it does help to build morale, and the kids love that. And especially when the teachers get on board with it, and the principals and everybody. I mean, so thank you again for that. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. I could tell you needed it, so.
Yes.
I think your next task should be everybody wears camel heads on Wednesday and does hump day.
Keep working on those ideas. Keep working on them.
Mr. President,
Yes? Wayne?
I just wanted to second what Jeff said. Thank you for putting a smile on my face tonight. I never thought that would happen in a school board meeting, but it did. I appreciate it very much. Thank you.
Okay. Next up is the superintendent's report.
Do we have another speaker?
Oh, do we have another speaker? No.
Just
no.
one?
I think it was just the one, yes.
Okay. I thought you said there were two.
I thought there were two, but it was just the one.
Okay. So first I wanted to let you know that on Tuesday evening, we hosted a community meeting at Liberty Curtin regarding an update on the Liberty Curtin Elementary School project. I estimated that there were about 50 people in attendance. Principal Umbenhauer, myself, Rob Pasella provided the audience with a brief history of the project and the timeline for completion. We also shared with the group the planning and thought process involved in selecting a new construction project over a renovation project. All of those in attendance were supportive of the project, and several stayed around to ask questions and discuss it in more detail. Jeff and Polly were also both in attendance at that meeting, and I just didn't know if either one of you wanted to add a little more detail from your attendance there.
Well, I'll just mention a couple of things that I was very pleased with the turnout of the parents. And I think Jackie and Brett did a great job of presenting, along with Rob, of presenting the whole process. And everybody there that was in attendance was very positive, very happy with what we've accomplished to this point in the process. And I think they're really excited about the project. And so I was very pleased with the way the evening went. It was very informative, and I think everybody appreciated it.
Yeah, I want to agree. I agree with what Jeff said. Everyone there was very positive. Everybody had positive comments, and we're very excited to see the process coming into fruition. I think I speak for everybody there when I say that this has been a long time coming, and we're very excited for it. We're excited to see what it'll do for the community, and it's a great thing, and I hope that we can keep everybody on board with it.
So I just, again, want to remind the board members and members of the public that any comments or questions can be directed to a single email address, which is lcproject@kcsd.us. This evening, I also wanted to provide you with a brief update on our progress with the school safety concerns that have been coming across the last several months. Since our public meeting last month, Mr. Kondo and I have been gathering input, ideas, suggestions to add to the additional of the existing safety and security measures that have been in place. Tomorrow, we have a scheduled meeting with the principals to organize that information and formalize an updated safety plan. We'll share our plan and recommendations with the Safety and Security Committee of the board, including any funding or funding sources needed. And then we're going to, if we have the support of that committee, we'll take the necessary steps to follow through then with the full board and bring things forward. One of the examples of that I'd like to share is that we've been looking into some technology tools that can be used in our restrooms to assist in monitoring occupancy count, vaping, aggression, loud noises, and several other features. We've looked at a few models and we're currently exploring a particular system that ties into our existing camera security system. This model is expected to help reduce the costs. Well, this model compared to other models would reduce costs because it ties into that existing system and it would improve functionality. If we feel this purchase is needed, we're kind of testing it out a little bit now. Mark and I had an opportunity to meet with some of the officers and one of the vendors today, ask a lot of questions, see some things in action. So we're going to see how it goes. I've also been gathering information from other superintendents who have used the same tool. If we feel that we want to recommend this for purchase, we also want to recommend to how we would fund such a purchase, which could possibly come from in the form of a grant. So there's also many other ideas that have already been implemented such as increased coverage for transition times at different schools. Additional radios were purchased to increase communication and response time. We've spread those out for people who are on duty, not just for the administrators, but additional folks have access to that now. We've also scheduled Safe to Say Something training sessions for staff and students. If you're not familiar with that system, there is a lot of information online. This system was implemented by the Pennsylvania Attorney General a few years ago, and it has been very effective in preventing people from harming themselves or others. We've also had additional staff trained in safety care. Even as today, I think there were 30 different staff members who participated in recertification of that safety care. And safety care is more than a crisis management training, but it provides the skills and competencies necessary to effectively prevent, minimize, and manage behavioral challenges, where the student who is misbehaving can be addressed with dignity, safety, and also the possibility of change. A lot of that, most of that training is in de-escalation techniques. So when something starts to bubble up, what are the strategies that could be put in place to kind of get things calmed down before they escalate? So also within the last month, all staff completed an online training on school safety and violent behaviors. There were several modules, including myself. All staff members have taken part in that training. And there was also in-person training scheduled last week at an in-service day. So I just wanted to make sure that not only the board, but the public was aware that we have taken all of the suggestions that came at the public meeting, in addition to any emails that came in, phone calls, even personal conversations. And we had a repository in one place. Thank you, Teresa, for helping collect and organize that. And then we're taking that information from the repository tomorrow to formalize everything. So just wanted to provide everyone with that update. So thank you.
Great, thank you. Any questions?
No, it's great.
Okay. Next up are the committee reports. First under that is the Facilities Committee.
Oh, thank you. The Facilities Committee met here last month on the 28th, and we had quite a lengthy agenda. I don't want to take too much time here, but I did want to hit some of the highlights of our meeting. We had some people from the Homestead Estates area, which is here in Mill Hall, approached the committee about a problem with some stormwater runoff that is coming down, and they were saying it is because it's coming off of our property, and there used to be a swale there that apparently is filled up with sediment some over time. It was addressed about 20 years ago when we did some work at the middle school, and it had been addressed, and the swale was, I guess, created there at the time that we were addressing some other stormwater concerns. We did fix it, and apparently it's gotten to the point now where it's filled up again and not doing its job, and the water's running down and behind the condos there in the back part of Homestead. And so we listened to the folks there, and we asked that the committee asked that Dr. Martin and Robin, the folks work with them or come up with some kind of a solution. So they're working on that right now, and we'll have more information at the next committee meeting. So, which we'll be addressing it further at that time. But we have three grants that they're in the works. One is the update on we got an update on the renewal of America's School Grant. That's the one where we submitted the concept paper, and we are one of, I think, 3 districts in the state that were selected to move on to the application phase. That's the $17 million or $15 million that we're asking for. We have a $2 million obligation if we were to get that. And that's the one, excuse me, we're going to be getting, if it's funded, we can use it for the HVAC system here. And it also includes some 3 solar sites. And it's a really big deal if we are to get it. So we have to have our application in on the 21st, which is only a week away now. And I know Dr. Martin's been in the process of gathering some letters of support from different agencies and groups from around the community to add to that. The second grant was the COPS grant. It's up to a $500,000 maximum grant. And we would have to have a match of about $165,000 for that. That would be to use to fund a new key system in the different buildings, and ours is woefully out of date and it needs to be updated. So hopefully if we get that one, we can use it for that purpose. We also have the Stop School Violence grant, which is a grant that I know that Mr. Kondo and Mrs. Manning are working on putting that together. And we also have gotten a contract with Resource Associates to help us with the actual writing of that grant. And that would be used for updating our alarm systems and some other electronic things in the buildings. That grant could be as much as $2 million over a 3-year period. And but we do have the Resource Associates, and I think it's like a $6,000 cost for that to help manage that grant, or at least help write it. And then we had an update on all of and I guess I really want everybody to really understand how much we have been doing to the district and the facilities over the past 2, 3, 4 years. And we got an update on these projects that are either completed or are in the process of going to be completed here over the summer months or a little bit beyond that. We're working on and I'll just run through these real quick because I think everybody should be aware of what we have going and how much we've been doing with our facilities. We're going to be doing some updating and renovating of the girls' locker room at Bucktail. That's going to probably start here at the beginning of the summer. We've had just completed the middle or high school rather pavement overlay in the bus loop. It's done. We have, and you'll see later in the agenda that we are going to be having to purchase new stage curtains for 3 of the buildings because the insurance company or insurance carrier rather will not give us the coverage unless we update these so that they're flame retardant. And we have to do them, I believe, in the middle school, this building, and up at Bucktail. And so that purchase or the information on that is later in the agenda. We have a CM at the high school, the boilers, there's three units on order. He's, of course, with waiting to get things, it's probably not going to get here till December. And so that'll be done over the next year. But the other things, The top order is for the Mill Hall building should be here in sometime in June or July. The boiler controls for Mill Hall also is ordered, and they're going to work, that work will start next month. The Robb parking lot, where we have a project there, we're going to extend that whole parking lot out to give us more spaces, because at Robb, the parking is is at a premium. We need more space there. And so that's going to be, that project is, we're waiting on some permits and so on, and that's going to be starting hopefully this, and get it going in the summer and get it completed by fall. We also, the property service roof is completed. The Robb cafeteria floor is going to be polished concrete. That'll be done over the summer. We have outside doors replacements that are going to be safety required by our architects. They're going to make sure that they're properly secured and so on. The type of door that we're going to, or that'll be purchased with PCCD money from that grant. And we're looking at replacing the middle school canopy, which is way overdue for replacement. We're looking at a design, hopefully from Crabtree, for that. So we also will be, as we mentioned earlier about the Liberty Curtain project, we discussed, the impact on the budget of that. Hopefully we'll have the architect back in at our next meeting to give us some idea, a little closer idea of cost factor for that project. Right now, we have some ballpark numbers and that we've been looking at. So hopefully we'll get a little bit more specifics at that point. So, and I think that's pretty much it. I'm sorry that I took so long, but I just think it's important that, the board and the public know how much we've been really focusing on improving our facilities in the past 2 or 3 years. And I know it costs money, and I realize that, but I think it's money well spent, because you want your facilities to be as good as they can be for your staff and students, and make it so that they can get as good an education and as good a physical environment as they can. So I'm excited, especially about this Liberty Curtain thing. I think we're talking, I guess Joni's going to have we're going to look at some bond, have some different options and some bond funding for that. We can get pretty creative with that too. So, and I know maybe Butch will maybe touch on that a little bit more when he talks at his finance committee, but I thank you for indulging me here, but I just felt that it was important that everybody knows what's been going on. Thank you.
Yep, thank you. Nice job. Any questions? Nope. Okay, next one up is the curricular next up is Finance Committee.
Yeah, tying right in what Jeff was saying, basically at the finance, what we're running now, right after we have facilities, we run finance, because we're finding they're really tied together. Because once we decide we have to build something, we have to figure out how we're going to pay for it. The big issue was the Renew America School Grant submission with the $17 million project. That's going to be a $2 million matching grant on our part. So we had to actually build that $2 million into the next budget. So that's actually going to be built into it. If we get it, we have it. If not, then that money will not be needed. Something that I think Jeff mentioned that I thought was really noticeable, that the part of that project is providing solar units at this school, Bucktail, and I think the middle school, Woodward. So there's going to be 3 different sites, and PA Solar Project Center is coming in, and they're going to give us 10 hours of free technical support with a project summary and public relations section of the grant application. So that's just another notch, I guess, in that.
I got that
application.
today too.
Yeah, that's perfect. I just saw it on there. Yeah. That's something good that we have that's going to help us.
I think just one thing I wanted to mention, we've been talking about this Renew America Schools grant, but in addition to the fact that it would potentially offset $15 million of a $17 million project over the following 3 decades, it's also anticipated that it would also save us about $11 million in energy. And so it's not just a one-time shot of money, but I think it allows us to do some energy savings and be responsible to the environment in the future.
And we had a discussion on our proposed 23-24 budget. That's going to have to be adopted at the May 11th meeting. I think Joni's going to be here next month and give a presentation.
Next week.
Sorry, next week,
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Next week on what it would look like with no tax increase, 50% tax increase. And that's 50% of what the index is. So it's not saying that you have a $100 bill is going to raise 50%. It's going to be 50% of what the index number is. So I think it's about 4.
It's the adjusted index for us is 5.1. So a 50% increase would be less than 3%.
So it's going to be, she's going to have a presentation on that. And Jess also mentioned one of the things we had to come up with money to spend is like roughly around $180,000 for the 3 stage curtains. It's on the agenda for us to vote on next week. With the insurance company saying that the fire retardancy is not adequate, we had to step in and do something for them now. So that's something we weren't expecting.
That would be capital from capital.
Fund.
Yeah.
And this- I had an article I was reading, actually it's in the PSBA bulletin that we get, that talked about school funding, and it talked about how inadequate our funding is through the state and federal government. And it also talked about, I think it said 490 of the 500 school districts in the state are anticipating raising taxes next year. So it's a pretty good read if you all have an opportunity to see that. It was in the, I think, Tuesday's PSBA bulletin we get every day. So if you didn't get it, let me know. I can send you a copy of it. But it talked in great length about how the federal and state government's not adequately funding us, even though they just lost a lawsuit, the fair funding lawsuit. They haven't determined how they're going to fund us yet. So we're still stuck with what we get. So that's it.
Thank you. Now, the next one is the co-curricular committee.
Thank you. Some of it you've already heard because Megan came to our committee meeting and provided a pretty in-depth overview of what's going to be occurring around curricula in the future and standardization. So that part I won't go over too much. We also learned about the Career Technology Center and some of their programs that might be a little more cutting edge. There's some green energy, solar certification that our students will be able to work towards prior to graduation, and that they'll even be able to graduate with some certifications that will make them very marketable. And a number of articulation agreements that I think are pretty cutting edge for our students at Keystone Central in terms of they can complete a significant number of credits for community colleges, technical colleges, as well as traditional bachelor universities. So pretty exciting time for our students in Keystone Central. And I think often media does focus upon the negatives, but there are many positives if students have the opportunity to take advantage of it.
Dr. Schulz, thanks you for mentioning that. And those articulation agreements are on tonight's agenda as well to be discussed. We recently found out, since this agenda was developed, that IUP would also like to have an articulation agreement with us. So if there's no objection from the board, I'd like to add that before next week too. So I just want to give you a heads up.
Okay.
It doesn't cost any money. It's really just an articulation agreement.
It's a positive for our
Yeah, it's
students
just
to
another
take
opportunity for
advantage of.
kids. Yeah.
Many of these are advanced placement courses or that the students who are in the
Could you
CTC,
speak into the microphone, please?
that the students in the CTC, that if they do that work, they have advanced standing as they move into a technical college or community college. So it's pretty exciting. And I'll go back also, I had mentioned about the librarians. When Megan presented her curricula, that was where I was shocked to find out that we don't have a full-time librarian at the high school and that many librarians are shared. You know, she did talk about some of the training and literacy work that our teachers do, but from my standpoint, I think that's an area that our school board has to push in the next few years. I think that's one pivotal area that. Well, librarians nowadays are not the traditional, for many of us, we could go back to obviously the card catalogs in those days. That's long gone. Librarians nowadays are much more health literacy experts and are involved in the classrooms and in the communities. And I think there's just some work we can do in that area to assist teachers in serving some students. So that's sort of a project I hope to get involved in the next few years.
Hold it. You mean we don't use the card catalogs anymore?
We do not have card catalogs. There are computers.
Do they still have, do they still have the Dewey Decimal
System?
System?
Set foot in a library, the
Where have
old
you been,
fashioned
Roger?
library. We have to really rethink, and our librarians are unique teachers, learners.
They're really
outreach
media
workers.
specialists now.
Yes,
Yeah, in the
yes.
21st century, it's media specialists.
So just to let you know. So a lot. And to go back to what Butch was talking about, the school funding, there's advocacy days coming up that the School Board Association is offering. Unfortunately, it's virtual this year. I wish it was face to face. We're going down and meeting some of them. And frankly, many of our legislators are not doing their job in Harrisburg for the school funding. And
Move close to the microphone.
we
Say that
need to
again.
say that our
that again, please.
legislators in Harrisburg are not doing their job on reforming school funding, and especially for rural regions. There's too much focus on urban and suburban, already very wealthy districts and surrounding 5 counties of Philadelphia. And our legislators who are in this region need to be focusing on this issue. It needs to be a priority issue because it touches all of us in so many ways.
Mr. President,
Yep, Wayne, go ahead.
we also have an appeals court decision made on the funding of education in Pennsylvania, saying that it was unconstitutional. So we got that to support us in
Yes,
the funding situation.
That's my report. Thank you.
Hey, Wayne,
thank you.
Wayne, just so you know, now we got someone else pushing for us to get involved with the representatives down there. Rick.
Yeah,
We need to take school buses of kids and their parents down there. That's who the legislators will
Well,
listen to.
if it's okay, I take the liberty to say that on Tuesday is the PSBA's Legislative Advocacy Day, and originally it was scheduled to be in Harrisburg and was turned into a virtual day. And I've invited 4 students to join me on Tuesday here in the boardroom to log on, or actually we'll be in my office, I think, with the Zoom meeting. I think some of you are signed up for those sessions and you'll see us there. And so I think it's great for our students to start to get involved and see how do we, as educational leaders, advocate for public education to our legislators.
Great.
So they'll be right there with us.
Fantastic.
Mhm.
Okay, thank you. Next up is Personnel Committee. Tracy is not here, and I don't believe that anything that is not an executive nature has been discussed at those meetings. Okay, so we'll move on to the next one, Safety and Security Committee.
I think Dr. Martin talked about some of the things we're exploring that we can talk about in public. So yes, we have some initiatives that we are looking at. Hopefully we'll have more to report next week when we have our voting session. But just something I just found interesting. I just been cutting some junk out of the newspaper. And here's an article from Tuesday, March 14th, Express. And you know, I keep telling everybody that I don't believe we have a school problem, we have a society problem. So if you look at that, and I don't know who wrote this for the Express, but it's our view for the Express. And it starts with, it starts with parenting. That role, that oh so very important job, is the key to raising a good and decent child. And it goes on and talks about what the students need to do. And the question is, then they ask, where are the parents? Where is their accountability in this situation? What are they doing to prevent violence? And that parents need to be partners with the children's teachers and school administrators. Parents must enforce school behavior policies starting at home. So I guess, again, we have to start partnering with the parents, not having the parents blame us for everything going on. And again, I just clipped this out of the April 6th Express. It's just a police note, just a little bit lengthy. So as you can see, there's quite a few on there, but what I found interesting on here, there's 5 different incidents involving 6 different teenagers from 12 to 16 charged with assault, shooting somebody with an Orby gun, whatever an Orby gun is.
But that's not on school property, correct?
Not on school
Okay.
property, but as I
I'm
said, it's a
just want to make sure
society-
everyone
it's a
understands.
society problem, not a school
Right.
problem.
It's just as important. Yeah.
Where,
Mhm.
where's all the people who've been in uproar about everything going on in schools? Why aren't they in an uproar at Lock Haven City Council meetings? Most of these happen in Lock Haven City. So I think it's, again, we have to get together and we all have to work some way and find some way to solve the problems with our youth of America. So that's my rant for that.
Okay, thank you. Other comments or questions about the committees? Okay. Next agenda item is information discussion items, including the treasurer's reports, financial reports, and enrollment reports. Are there any, I think we can deal with these as a group. Are there any questions about any of these? These are the typical reports that are provided to us. Okay. Moving on to section G, we have under items 1 and 2, a couple donations that have occurred.
They're both for the CTC program, and I think all the information has been outlined for you in the agenda.
Okay. Item 3 is the grant authorization or application authorization. That was mentioned previously.
Yep, I have no additional information for you. Everything was covered in the committee reports and as well as in the agenda for your review. I will, the one thing I will say is that the dollars that we would need to commit down below to match the grants or to have with the grants are accounted for in the projected budget figures.
Okay. Item number 4 is a settlement that we'll be voting on. Item number 5 is in regard to an exchange students who will be with us next year.
Hopefully, the one that was previously approved has been unable to finalize the application process. So the one that you previously approved is not attending, but this is a different student.
From Belgium, I believe.
I'm kind of curious about this because it says it's not a new exchange student. I thought it was a new exchange student that we were looking at bringing in.
This isn't the same one?
No, not the same.
No, this
Not
one.
the same. I think it's a typo.
Okay, that's just,
It's good catch.
okay. All right.
Just changed it.
Okay, thank you.
Well, that's what I thought. And then I saw that and I'm like, hold it.
I
what's
didn't
go-"
see that note. It says it's under executive content too.
Yeah. So, all right.
Okay, next, item number 6 is the 2020 AASA Learning 2025 National Summit. The superintendent will be attending.
There'll be other members of the administrative team attending too, and that would be paid for with Title II funds, grant dollars.
And I have to say that whenever they go, they do a incredible job. Because they don't just go down there and see stuff or whatever, they actually participate. And I'm actually hoping that this is when we get our lighthouse status.
Well, I've been asked to present again this year because our group did such a great job last year. They did ask us to present again, so I submitted that proposal as well as requested. And if any board members would like to consider attending that event, you need to let me know and we'll get you registered.
Fantastic. Let's see, section H. There's several policies on the list for first review.
I got a couple questions on policy 226.
Okay,
So I assume this is just a revision of the policy. It's nothing that we never had before.
This is the exact same policy that's been in effect, I believe, help me, committee members, 2016.
I was gonna say 19
Most
or
of the
16.
200 policies have not been reviewed since 2016. So that's why we do a curriculum cyclical review, and we're on the 200s. And as you see in the notes, the recommended action, it's getting late, is that there were no updates from PSBA or any law changes with regards to searches. So therefore, we're recommending the policy go through continue as it was, and it would be marked as reviewed by the
I
board.
just want to make sure I'm reading something correctly when I'm looking this over.
You know, if you see bold, any bold letters,
Okay,
those are modifications, edits, suggestions, depending on what the topic is.
I'm
so.
reading here that the school district has authority to lawfully search students or their belongings, including lockers, automobiles, electronic devices, purses, backpacks, clothing, or other possessions without a warrant. When in school or on school grounds, when otherwise under school supervision. So we're legally allowed to search them. And if you get down farther, it even talks about, I found this hard to believe. Maybe I should have paid more attention to these policies in the last 10, 12
But
years.
it's impossible to know them all.
But it actually talks it,
But remember,
if we're allowed to search their private cell phones and call logs, if they're on our property with a phone. And if we have reason to believe that they violated some sort of law, policy, or procedure, we can conduct a search, a physical search, and have them remove their clothes, as long as it's done in front of two people of the same sex. Well,
yeah, but yeah, I think I've noticed other school districts
yeah.
do that. And I'm not sure about the electronic devices item. That might be a question for the school lawyer. But yeah, I am aware of the one you just mentioned.
It's under guidelines. It says examination by school staff of text messages, call logs, files, images, or other data contained in a student's mobile telephone or other electronic device without a student's consent normally constitutes a search that must be justified by reasonable suspicion that material in violation of the law, district policy, or school rules. So, and it talked, like I said, it talked about actually strip search. So I think if we're gonna have this policy, maybe we ought to start this and start enforcing the policy.
Do you want to talk about it during the safety committee
No,
meeting?
these are good points. Yeah.
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
thank you.
No, these
Yeah,
are
thank you
really
for
good
bring-
points.
Well, I
yeah,
didn't know. I
yeah,
didn't
thank you
know
for
because
bringing.
Mark, I didn't know.
So, yeah, I just.
It's,
happened to
we're
read
just
through this
discussing the
today 'cause
policy.
I was bored.
Okay, good.
So,
there are searches conducted on a regular basis.
so, okay.
When reasonable suspicion is there, there are searches conducted by our administrative team. I would say almost every day at our secondary schools.
Okay, great. I just want to make sure the public knows that, and if we have suspicion, we can actually have Duchess, I think is the dog's name,
Right?
to
Yes.
buy the person.
Mhm.
So,
Mhm.
Onto this.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah, thank you, Butch,
Thank you.
like I said, for pointing that out. Yeah, it's important because I think maybe there's been some misunderstandings in regard to those things.
And could I make a comment on another policy? Another one, it says, because this relates to safety and security, at least what was brought up at the forum, student involvement and decision-making policy from 2016 says that the board believes students should participate in the governance of school activities at all levels appropriate. And I'm interpreting this that we need to get some student reps involved in some way. or
So if I
another,
could address that,
advisory.
where's my policy committee peeps? At the policy committee, we talked about this in depth, not just this past week, but actually last month, was that, and some of the things that have come forward from our students that have talked with the principals and myself, is that they don't believe that the way their student government is currently operating at the secondary schools is the way that they would like it to operate to mimic a true democratic experience. So what we decided was that we would start exploring the idea of firming up the student government processes. And so what you'll see, I think the student government policy is on tonight's agenda, right? Was that on there too? Or-
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the student government, there's not a lot of changes to the policy, but I did meet with all of the secondary principals last week to go over the administrative regulations. And when I have the students with me next Tuesday, on Tuesday, I've set aside some time to go over the administrative regulations with them and to get their input and feedback as well. And so by the time the board would be expected to approve this next week, the AR would already be firmed up. And then also in working with Mr. Varelli, we've talked about having some students visit some other school districts where they are maybe fully functioning with a student government and a student council and a student body so that they do represent that voice. And so it's going to take us some time to get that firmed up. And I know that for a fact that our administrators have also started talking to some staff members about being key leaders and advisors to meet the new vision of that. And what the policy committee discussed was that once we get that firmed up, that we would be able to have a firm process so that if we wanted to move to a student rep on the board, we could consider that for next school year, because there would be an actual formal process for that student rep to bring forward the student voice. So we didn't want to put the cart before the horse, but it's been discussed. Was it, it might have even been 2 meetings ago.
It was yesterday, 2 days ago.
Well, not, it was, no, before that.
It was before that?
Yeah, when we were in Mark's office for that meeting
Oh, that's right.
several
That's right. I'm
months
sorry.
ago. So it's been in the works and we've been taking action to move in that direction.
I'm glad Rick brought that. I was gonna bring it up also, because I thought one of the things that was brought up at our impromptu meeting we had here a couple weeks ago, that it's fairly obvious that the students felt they needed representation on the board. And I thought that policy actually allows it to happen. I think we need to move forward with trying to find, I was going to suggest 2 representatives, one from Central Mountain and one from the other
What-
high school, Buckton.
What we discussed at the policy committee meeting was letting us work towards firming this up and then starting with student updates from student government. Because there's 2 different things. You can have student voice and student updates, but having a student member on the board is a different role. And some districts do it. I've been in districts that do it both ways. And so I think the direction I was given from that committee was to, let's start with 1 step at a time, firm up the processes first, and then move towards those directions. And that we felt that by the time we started the school year, we would at the very minimum have the student government firmed up and be able to have student representatives give the board updates. And then if we wanted to move even further, we could.
Yeah, and I'll be honest with you, I mean, I really like that stepped process, because there's gonna be kinks whenever you try, to implement something new. And that way, it's gonna be built for success versus, all right, well, we tried it and it failed. So I mean, that's what we're sort of looking at, is long-term success. So just starting slowly. And then when you feel comfortable with it, possibly going to a greater role, possibly.
I think we need to have the principals in both the high schools, in particular, even the middle school.
Mhm.
And I think I talked to Nick about this a while back, but to do exactly what you're saying, get the student council, student government operating as a governmental body and do it correctly. And then we can move from that point. Once they have a spokesperson for that group, then they can bring us the information. So, but I think it is going to take time. I mean, it has to be, you have to find the right person as an advisor and that the students feel comfortable with and who's dedicated to making it work. So.
And
anxious
just
to
back
see
on
it.
another issue too, I was just thinking Butch brought up about the strip searches. And Elizabeth and I were just at a workshop on Tuesday at Lock Haven. A woman who is a teacher in South Jersey, but she's a mom of a transition from female to male. And she's written children's book and she's a trainer for the Children's Hospital. And she was talking to faculty, staff, and anyone else who would, and students. But it brought up, because she was talking about teens and some of the trauma her child suffered in school districts outside of Philadelphia. And many of the students, their genitalia is not going to match what they feel they are. So strip searches would be very uncomfortable for not only some staff, but also for the young person.
Something to take into consideration.
Yeah, I mean, that's just one little issue. I just thought of that from our program. She was a fascinating speaker.
She was excellent, incredible.
She's talking from the heart, but also from our profession.
Okay.
Christina, can I ask you a question? The leadership program that you have, is that coincide with like the
Club?
governance club or whatever it is? Yeah, student council type stuff or student government? Okay, I was
That was
just
the
kind of
discussion that we
curious.
had with Mr. Peters and the administrators is some of the work that's being done with those student leaders and how we could work within the new administrative regulations and the policy to kind of develop that into certain steps.
That's a good
Okay.
one.
Yeah, I was just
Mhm.
curious.
Yeah, it's also informative.
Mr. President,
Yes, Wayne?
I'd like to thank the people who were present at the policy committee meeting yesterday. I was not doing well my duties as the chairman. I missed that meeting because I was thinking that it was the Wednesday after the work session and I forgot it's the second Wednesday of the month.
No
So I
problem.
apologize for not being there yesterday. But I think everybody was there. You did yeoman work, I think.
Elizabeth stepped in.
Well, It was a team, it really was a
It
team
was.
effort. It really was.
Thank you for doing that.
But don't ask me to explain things. We have a deal.
Okay, any other questions about policies?
No, thank you.
Okay, all right, we'll move along here. I think we can maybe deal with the minutes as a group. There are meeting minutes from several meetings listed here. Are there any specific questions about any of them? No. Okay. Next item up is J, business. We have the typical bills for payments and those sorts of things. Anything here that we should be highlighting? Item number 1 is bills for payments. Item number 2. I'm not sure I recall what this one is. Okay,
Is one of your favorites.
okay. Item 3 is the intermediate unit number 10 budget resolution.
This is something we have to do annually as part of the IU 10 group. is to approve this portion of the IU-10 budget. And then I think just for a reminder to the board members that Jeff Johnson serves as a member of the Keystone Central School Board on the IU-10 Executive Board. Board.
Okay, the stage curtains that were mentioned earlier, anything additional there to mention? Okay.
Thank you, Mr. President. Yes, I'm on the Facilities Committee, and I also love being on the Facilities Committee. We have a really good team on the Facilities Committee. But I don't feel comfortable with the curtains until I had some answers before I could actually give my own personal recommendation, even though we make a recommendation as a team. I don't understand. I know they're old and the mechanisms might be non-functioning. I don't know that. But I do know that there's companies all across the country that clean them and retreat them. They'll either come to your site or you ship them to them. And also, I had asked if the curtains would be treated with a green school type product, or would it be a conventional type flame retardant? And the other thing I asked is to know what the warranty is for the flame retardant chemical that will be on these curtains. From what I understand, and I could be wrong, the flame retardant chemical has to be retreated every 1 to 2 years. So
I followed up with you on those questions in an email to the committee members. I'm looking for it now. There is no chemical at all. The material that's used in the stage curtain is flame
I'm sorry,
retardant
I
in
did not,
itself.
my fault. I did not see. the
I was
email.
just
So go ahead,
looking
please,
for it. But yeah, there is no chemical treatment at all,
Good.
which I thought you'd be really pleased with.
Very happy.
Based on your comments. And so I'm looking for that email now I can follow up with you after the meeting and show you with the following day is when Mr. Pasella got some answers back from the company regarding the questions from the facility meeting.
Doesn't surprise me. Rob is always on. That's why I was surprised. I do hope though that if it's less expensive to compare, just to have them cleaned and treated, or where these curtains going to be warranted for 5 years or 10 years, the mechanisms and all that. So just so if we can use these curtains for another 5 years, I would love that.
Yeah,
But-
that's not going to be possible based on the insurance company audit that happens every 5 years. So that's why we recommended going this route, but I can follow up with you on those details.
Okay,
as soon as I
thank you.
find them.
Okay. So items, I think 5, 6, and 7 are related to agreements we have with colleges and community colleges. Any questions in regard to them?
Just so we'll be adding IUP for next week. So there'll be an additional one.
Okay. Let's see, item 8 is the contract extension for Jeff Wall, who is a consultant working with Jody.
And that's pretty much an as needed.
It's just
contract.
as needed. It's much
Right.
less hours. But again, just to get her through that first budget all the way through June.
Okay, and item number 9 is a library reading report. Did you hear back, Roger, with your, in regard to your question?
No.
I
But
didn't see a
I-
question.
It was the one about the muzzle loader. There's a book about muzzle loading that was being weeded out from, what was it, 89? And I was just like, well, do we got any more muzzle loader books in there? So I'm just curious.
We can
Did
help you
wanna
out.
Read it?
So,
We'll help you out.
yeah.
Okay, any other
Did you wanna
questions
read?
about the library reading reports?
Maybe they'll give you a copy.
It was 3 years after I got out that it was put in there, so.
Okay, next up is personnel.
I have a question on personnel.
Okay.
So just before I get most of my news from Facebook, I saw something on there today talking about the Keystone Camp Credit Recovery Program we're advertising. It's going to be run during the summer. I thought it said for high school students, they have to have no less than a 50% average to participate in it. I see we're having, I think it said middle school can't be failing more than 2 classes. I don't know off the top of my head what it said, but I think you can't be failing more than 2 classes. I noticed we have like 12 aides at $18 an hour working it, and 35 teachers at $36 an hour working it, which is a substantial sum of money for students that are not keeping up. I'm just curious how many of those students are sitting in their class with their head on their desk, not paying attention because they don't care about anything. And they just, when summer school comes, they'll take the class because it's easier or anything.
So I think
Are we rewarding students for bad behavior now or letting them take it in the summer?
not in my opinion. I think there's many reasons that students fail. A lot of the things that are going on in their home lives are not what we would consider traditional home life or supportive families. The positions on the personnel report are positions to fill Keystone Camp, and that's a K-12 model that we run at 3 different locations in the summer. And the funding for that is from the ESSER funding. It's also for the learning loss because of all the ESSER funding that we did receive. There is a percentage of that funding that must be spent in addressing learning loss. And so we're required to have some kind of programs before, after school, during the summer, outside of school hours to address that. And so we've been running Keystone Camp. Is this our 3rd summer for Keystone Camp? Yes. Okay. And so, and proportionally, Megan, would you mind taking the mic?
Sorry, Megan.
No, it's okay.
Need help?
Yeah, it's late. So proportionally, those 35 staff members and I think 18 assistants, you said, Butch, are over K-12. Typically, we only have about 10 at the high school level, and the rest go with the K-8 model, which is where we usually have about 200 to 300 students. At the high school level, we typically have 30 to 40.
I'm not as concerned about how many numbers, the numbers we have. What I'm concerned about is I've heard from different teachers that kids are napping in their classes, not doing it in their classes, being disruptive in their classes because the alternative then is coming to summer school is credit recovery and they can pass and move on. So if the students are having that we're using for this, or if they have having a history of misbehaving and being disruptive, is there a way we can keep them from doing this? And then I know the outcome then be we help hold them back a year.
There is retention, but there's also a lot of other supports and things that we're putting in place that not just this. So it's not just, okay, you did that, so now this. There are a lot of other things and steps in there that for each individual case. And then they work with it, not only the principals, but the counselors, our school social worker, behavior specialists, the crisis counselor. There are a whole lot of other steps in there. So I don't think I think that you're missing some pieces from whatever you're being informed about. There's a whole lot of other steps.
I'm just concerned that we're spending a lot of money to help kids that really don't care. And they're the same ones we're having trouble with the disruptions daily in school. So maybe if we start.
Not necessarily.
So.
Not necessarily. So I think it's a good program. I think we've seen some success from the program. We also, I like the program and I'd invite the board members to come and see it in the summertime.
Maybe that's one thing we've never asked for, Butch. I mean, we have every, to evaluate what was we've never done that for these summer school programs is at what level was the student?
We do evaluate that.
No, not you. I'm saying we have never requested to see the evaluation so we can see how the investment is paying off. I mean, right now, I'm complete support of this program because I think I might know more about it.
I just don't want to reward the kids that are being disruptive now and making it difficult for the other kids to get a quality education. And the ones we've heard about for the last month disrupting our classes and
that's a small that is a very small percentage. We got to keep
is there any
remembering
data
that's a
that
small
shows
percentage.
That small percentage of kids that are being disruptive, how many of them participate in this with credit recovery?
I could get that data. I don't have it right
I'm
now,
just
but
curious.
I think it's what's important to understand is we have a high population of students that live in, that meet the poverty level.
Yes.
So when you have 50 to 60% of the students in our community who meet that level, if you've looked at any of the research that's been around for several decades, students in poverty typically have what's called a summer slide. And that summer slide, so they make a lot of progress during the school year. And then when they don't have that structure, they don't have those extra learning opportunities at home, the summer slide happens. So when those students come back to school, they're at a disadvantage compared to their peers because their summer slide is much greater. And so by offering this program free to our students, we provide transportation, we provide breakfast and lunch in that, and some interaction with adults. It's a half-day program that runs 4 weeks in the summertime. The idea is that we're preventing that summer slide. The way we can measure that K through 8 is through our Ames Web and our MAP data. Remember the triangle data? And so the idea is that we're not sliding as many kids as far back so that when they come in the fall. And if you looked, ever paid attention to closely to those triangle charts, they're getting better every year. And so we're having the growth. We're trying to slow the summer slide, do some of that learning recovery. And that's the benefit of the program.
That would be helpful, though. I know what he's saying. If that was segregated out from that data, just to also show, look, these are the kids that we were able to help over the summer, and this percentage went 1.2. I know you know what I'm talking about.
We already collect all that data for reporting, so that's easily shared.
Right. I think that would be very,
But the other thing I want you to remember is that this is not a program that is going to be funded after the ESSER funds go. And we talked about that when we implemented it with the boards a couple of years ago. And we said, look, when this ESSER fund runs out, the summer slide money runs out unless we find a grant source and a separate grant source. So there are some other options out there that we can consider if we want to determine. And our conversation was exactly what you're saying. Let's determine the success of the program before we decide if we want to continue to fund it or how we want to change it so that we are getting success.
Well, wasn't the whole purpose initially of these ESSER funds was not only to do what you're saying, to close that or keep that gap from happening over the summer, but initially it was to close the gap from COVID. I mean, some of these, some of these kids, especially those, I forget which group was, I think it was like the first graders or whatever, they lost a lot. And so the whole purpose of the summer program was not only to keep them from falling backward over the summer, but to close some of those huge gaps that we got because they were just, they just didn't get it for various reasons over that whole time period.
And I think there is evidence that it is working because if you remember what Megan and Justin were sharing, was it last month or month before, was that we're already returning, according to the standardized assessments, we're returning back to our pre-COVID levels. So yes, everybody had a dip, but we're springing back and that we're already back to those pre-COVID levels. So I think there is some evidence that it's working, and then we can track obviously not just group data, but individual data as well.
Okay, anything else in regard to the personnel item? Other questions? Okay. Next up is athletics.
Actually, I did want to mention, I had a call today from a community member asking some questions, and I thought if this person had some confusion, I thought maybe some others would too. So I just wanted to make sure that people are understanding with the assistant superintendent contract for Mark Kondo, that this is not an additional administrative position in the district. It is Mark's current position as HR director would no longer be in effect when this contract goes into effect. So I just want to make sure that everyone's aware it's a net zero gain of any additional positions in administration. And I think that several people had that confusion today. And so I thought it might be worth mentioning.
I had numerous phone calls about the same issues.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. Yes,
I
it's
had a
important to
number
know.
of phone calls and text messages and Facebook messages, basically furious over it.
And I think that if we recall, there was a administrative reorg chart that was approved by the board that had assistant superintendent in it. And I support the board's decision to put Mark in the role of assistant superintendent. He's qualified, he has the experience, and quite frankly, he's been doing many of the responsibilities on that job description for quite some time. And that's because of the number of mandates. Talk about our legislators, the number of mandates that have been placed on school districts have been compiled into one booklet. And one of the mandates that was placed on districts in 2019, this is when I came to the district, in January and said to Mark, we need to appoint you as the Act 44 Safety Compliance Officer. And since that time, not only did he finish his coursework for his letter of eligibility, but he's also gotten additional educational safety training and certification. And with our size of our district and the number of police officers that we have, that in itself sometimes is a full-time job. And so I just wanted to mention that he's qualified, he's certified, he's been doing the work. And he's the person who's taking calls in addition to some other staff members over the weekend, midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning on weekends, when safe to say calls come into the state police, when there's an emergency, when there's a bus accident, whether there's any type of emergency. He's usually the first one alerted, and then he, everything's dispatched. He gets the information as a safety officer and then provides me with the updates. So I just wanted to publicly say that I support the board's decision in this.
And I just want to add the fact that one of the reasons, and I think we looked at this position, was the fact that we need somebody in that position that has the proper certification and the proper guidelines from the state to step in. And because right now in his role, there's a lot of things he can't do as far as supervision and some things that an assistant superintendent can do, which is similar to what the superintendent can do with their with their commission and so on. And so it's a completely different role than he has now. And I think it's a wise move on our part, and it's not costing us any more money as far as creating new positions in that. But I think it's we're going to get much more, I guess it's going to be a better fit as far as I'm concerned. And I think what the board as a group thought, that's why we're going in this direction. And I just think that it's going to give him more authority, or more, whatever you want to call it, from what he had than what he has right now. And I just think it's a smart move at this time to do it. And so that's it.
Okay.
May I add my 2 cents?
Okay, Wayne, go ahead.
This is a move that has been long overdue in this school district. We needed an assistant superintendent going back to when I first came on the board in 2009. And this has languished all this time until now. So it's about time we do something here. And I'm glad it's happened now, at long last.
Good, thank you. Me too. Is that it?
I got
Athletic?
One more thing
Okay,
before we
all right,
adjourn.
good. Well, athletics, any questions
Oh, I'm
about
sorry.
the athletics item?
Oh, I have a comment,
Okay,
if it's okay. Stephen, I know you're out there. Hello, it's Elizabeth. Well, that's okay. It's fine. When during the curricular, non-curricular athletics committee meeting, oh my gosh, 1.5 years ago, then 1 year ago, then COVID. Bottom line, PIAA, and this is old news for some of you, Stephen especially. They did pass that program where they can train refs here in Clinton County, and the refs can be high school students. Okay, they just can't ref their own high school age group. So I really want to do something this summer, and I know there's all these things going on. I know
It's been advertised for students to be able to participate.
well, to have a training actually here. I know Stephen, so anyways, during the next curricular, co-curricular meeting, I would love it if we could consider putting that on the agenda. To look into the PIAA referee training, possibly have it here in Clinton County. Anyways, thank you.
okay, thank you. I think that's all we have. Any,
Butch,
I just got one
Oh,
more
yeah, sorry.
comment before we
Yes.
adjourn.
You
I
might,
know by now you're all thinking, you're all wishing I'd get rid of my Lock Haven Express subscription, but I thought this is kind of interesting from Friday, April 7th. And I think it's perfect to sum this whole meeting up tonight. A gentleman named Lloyd Schaefer, He was a retired English and humanities teacher from North Middleton Township. He writes quite often, and his question is, want to end the teacher exodus? It starts with a little respect. I think that's something we could end on, this, we need to start respecting our teachers. So,
Thank you.
thank you.
Okay, thank you.
When you say we, you mean as a community?
As a community, as a whole, the comments you get, that I get, talking about teachers, and something else I was interested in here that I, since you got me started on it, I found this just it blows my mind. The NEA says a staggering 55% of educators are thinking about leaving the profession. Can you imagine that? 55%. So if 55% of their teachers leave, who's going to educate the kids?
Yeah, and we have problems getting them now.
Yes.
They've all retired, or they've unfortunately passed away, or
Or they're
they've
just
left.
quitting because of lack of respect.
Yes, and
That's it.
this is the new normal. This is the
Well,
new
I do have
normal.
a meeting tomorrow with some folks from Lock Haven University to talk about a potential grant and a teacher pipeline program that we can apply for so that we can start apprenticing educators on site. And we would maybe look at having our own apprentice program. So we're taking some action to do that. And I have asked our legislators as well to praise teachers and talk positively about them because they're doing an amazing job. And I'm very proud to serve with the folks that we have here. And we are getting a lot of applications for vacancies right now in most of our areas because people want to come to our district. So that's the positive news I'll end on.
Thank you.
Great.
Mr. President,
Yes.
I'd like to make a motion to adjourn.
Okay. Someone.
Second.
I will
All right,
second.
thank you. Meeting adjourned at 9:09 PM.